Hello, everybody. Welcome to your very favorite Bronze Age Spider-Man podcast. Here comes the Spider-Cast. I am your co-host, Mike L., and as always, I'm joined by...
Joshua Mervell, and today we're actually going to be looking at some Spider-Ham comics from the 1980s.
That's right. The first time ever. And as usual, we have our special returning guest who's been on, I think, 30 in a row now, G.I. Jolie.
Just here to interlope. Interlope hard. Interlope eternally?
Mm-hmm. Hope so. And G.I. Jolie, would you like to do the honors of announcing our other very special guest this week?
Oh, yeah. So we have a very, very special guest. Someone who we wanted to have, who is top of mind when I think of Spider-Ham comics. I don't know why. He will enlighten us as to why.
You don't know why?
Oh, I don't remember specifically why. I mean, I get the general reason why.
I'm not sure you do.
And it's not because ham reminds me of you, but I feel like
no, that's realistic though. I eat a lot of bacon, but that's not why you should be thinking of me.
But
yeah, okay.
we have artist Jay Fosgitt on the show.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Ooh. Yeah. Ooh. Has anyone heard of me? Obviously not. Okay.
So Jay Fosgitt has been a frequent guest of our conventions in Windsor, but we met you years ago in Michigan, right? At Michigan Motor City Comic Con.
I want to say so, yeah.
I actually met Jay at Detroit Fan Fair.
That's right. That's right.
That's right.
And by meet, I mean creepily stuck a camera in his face.
Did you?
Yeah. There's the footage exists. I'll show you.
I thought I accosted you because when I found out you were Canadian, I'm like, you're awesome. We're friends now.
Friends forever.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. Who knows? Sorry. Go on.
No.
So
tell the folks at home about you.
Who? Who? Me?
Yeah, you and your relation to Spider-Ham, because I honestly am doing a really shitty job.
You know, for the record, yup. So anyway, so I work for Disney currently, and I had worked for Marvel for a few years there. I'm still kind of part of Marvel, but I drew covers for several books of theirs, including Avengers books, Deadpool, Gwenpool, Spider-Man. I've drawn interiors for Spider-Man. I've written and drawn for Not Brand Eck, which was Marvel's humor title. I've drawn Spider-Ham several times for both covers and interiors for Marvel, and I got to draw a story sort of set in the Spider-Ham universe with the Miles Morales version of a Spider-Ham character. He was called Moles Morales. And the writer escapes me at the moment. He really hilarious if you can find it. It was in All New, All Different Avengers #1. It was featured in there. But anyway, so I've actually worked on the character. Plus, I'm a lifelong fan of Spider-Ham ever since I picked up the first issue of his comic in 1985 because I'm old. So that happened.
Very cool. Yeah, so I'll just say quickly, when I was growing up reading Spider-Man, I came across, the advertisements, but it wasn't until I think the Marvel Tales, the Spider-Man Marvel Tales reprints that had Spider-Ham as a backup that I really read any of the stories, but I always enjoyed them. So you're saying you actually bought Peter Porker, the Spectacular Spider-Man #1 off the stand then?
I bought #2 off of the stand, but all the issues after that. And then years later, they actually put out a collection around 2008 or 9 that I got my hands on, which featured the very first appearance, which was in a book called Marvel Tales, Tails. That was a one-shot. And that was in maybe around 84, I think, about a year or so before he got his own series through Star Comics, Marvel's Kid imprint. So, yeah, I'm old school fan, legit.
Excellent. Okay, so before we jump into reviewing these, I just want to know very quickly, Josh, are you familiar at all with Spider-Ham?
A little bit here and there. Like I've definitely read random issues, but I've never read like a series or anything like that. So I'm familiar with the fact that he's kind of like obviously a parody of Spider-Man, and he's in like this own universe where like every superhero has their own like alter animal identity. So
Right. And G.I. Jolie, what about you? You're familiar with Spider-Ham?
I am, and it happened right after. It only happened because The Simpsons did it. The Simpsons.
in the movie.
Yeah, and Homer.
Yes.
I mentioned to
Right.
somebody, because Homer's like Spider Pig, and he has the Spider Pig, and he's putting it on the ceiling, and he's talking about it. I was like, oh, that's hilarious. Wouldn't it be cool if Spider-Man was a pig? And someone was like, Spider-Man has been a pig. It's called Spider-Ham, and I was like, excuse you?
Oh boy.
And then that's how I found out. I was like, whoa, this goes all the way back to the 80s. This is perfect. And then I've just been kind of obsessed with like the iconography of Spider-Ham. But not a familiar reader, yeah.
I love the design. I remember like I saw the advertisement for Peter Porker, the Spectacular Spider-Man number one all over, a bunch of comics in '85, but I definitely missed the Marvel Tales one that we're going to start off with. But up until this week, I had never actually seen this cover. But yeah, we can start with this one. So we start off here. So 1983, Marvel Tales, starring Peter Porker, the Spectacular Spider-Ham. And on the cover here, we've got Spider-Ham swinging upside down, and then it says with Hulk Bunny and Captain America. And then I love it. And then at the bottom it says plus Goose Rider. I love this already, right? This artist is, oh boy, I should have looked this up.
Jordan Orello, Mark Armstrong.
No, it's Malloy, but I don't know.
Steve Mellor. Steve Mellor was the cover artist for it. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead.
I'm a big fan of Steve Mellor, so he was a real creative force behind this book, even though he didn't draw. He usually either contributed scripts or inked or something, the main Spider-Ham stories, but almost all the backup stories where he did animal parodies of other Marvel characters, it was usually him and his brother, Mike Mellor, doing those.
Nice. So have you met Steve Mellor then?
I haven't. We have so many mutual friends, and they keep saying, yeah, we want to get Steve to meet you, but Steve's like kind of hidden away. He doesn't do comics anymore. He went to LA to be an actor for a long time, and so he's kind of hiding these days, but he was one of the most, he was a huge influence on mine, but he was a genius, funny comic book artist of the 80s.
Nice.
So you know what? It's funny because one thing we don't do on the show is research. We probably should, but are you aware of who created the character to begin with?
Well, yeah, Tom DeFalco was the original writer. So he kind of came up with the idea. But Mark Armstrong, who was the primary artist for the Spider-Ham stories, he really set the visual tone of it. Now, he's somebody you don't see in comic books besides Spider-Ham. You can look anywhere. He was kind of an underground guy, and I don't know where he is these days.
Sure.
But his style is like, I don't know how to explain it, very much an E.C. Seeger, Popeye creator kind of style of cartooning, what is known as Bigfoot cartooning. But he uses these amazing angles, and his perspective and foreshortening that he brings to this cartoony world is unlike anything else you've seen outside of like the old Scrooge McDuck comics that Carl Barks did.
Right. Great point. Yeah, I really like this art for sure. So we'll jump back into the story. So we open up with Spider-Ham kind of having a typical Spider-Man-esque adventure. He's just intervening on a bank robbery. And and of course this is mid, like, there's no origin for Spider-Ham. This is mid, story for him. So he recognizes these guys as the Gopher Gang. So he, foils their crime. We see some comedy in here with him juggling these guys, and he's still doing the Peter Parker bit where he's trying to take pictures of himself as Spider-Ham so we can sell them to, what's his name, J. Jonah Jackal?
Jackal, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Now, one thing that's different from a typical Spider-Man story is instead of sort of solving the crime on his own, he immediately gets help from Captain America, which is obviously a parody of Captain America. So Captain America comes in and helps him, knocks these bad guys out, and then we find out, which is actually quite different from the Spider-Man comics of this day, is that they immediately know each other's secret identity, which around this time in the comics they didn't. Which was really shocking to me, but they didn't know each other's secret identity. So here they know each other's secret identity. They're changing into their costumes behind, what is this thing called? This thing that's folded out, like a false wall.
Yeah, it's like a room divider.
Yeah, but it's like on top of like a building, so it's kind of funny. So anyway, so it turns out they both work at the Daily Beagle, right, instead of the Daily Bugle. So they go in, they touch base with J. Jonah Jackal, and he's all, of course, upset with them, and then he's talking about how there's something else going on. There was a what is this, a break-in at the video arcade called Video City by a guy named the Masked Marauder. And so J. Jonah Jameson sends Steve and Peter Porker out to cover the story. So then they drive down there, and as they're driving there, so they see this video game place with all these people protesting, and then right next to it is this amusement park called, I guess, Platypus. And so, and feel free, if I'm missing anything, feel free to jump in, guys. So basically, they go interview the guy who runs this amusement park, and so are they investigating the amusement park or the video game place?
It's the video game place. So a bunch of stuff keeps getting stolen from the video game place, and they're assuming that it has something to do with the video games, like competitors. So they go to talk to the amusement park owner before they run into the video game arcade. Right.
Okay. So right away we're starting to suspect. Okay, so who's behind all these crimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then they go in and they're kind of looking around, and they run into these other guys. Wait, who are these guys? Well, I just read this like 2 days ago, and I don't remember who anyone is for some reason.
The advocacy group Pause.
Yes.
Parents Against Whimsy Society.
Yeah. And so as they're investigating this place, the Masked Marauder is coming, and he's gonna cause some more hijinks here. And so what's his name here? So we've got the supporting character here, named, what is his name? The white rabbit guy.
Oh, that's Bruce Bunny.
That's Bruce Bunny, right? So he's looking into the back of this video game, and the Masked Marauder comes and like kind of locks him inside. So then he starts to get all, anxious because he's in there, and this game just happens to be called the Gamma Gambit, and apparently it's actually irradiating gamma rays. And so in this story, of course, Bruce Bunny, coincidentally, this is the origin of Hulk Bunny. So he turns into Hulk Bunny before our very eyes, right? So now we've got Captain America, Spider-Man, and the Hulk all being parodied here. So this is awesome. So then Spider-Ham goes back into the room, and Hulk Bunny's there. Hulk Bunny's angry, so he's fighting. Masked Marauder is still causing trouble. Captain America is trying to stop him. So they're having a fist fight. Again, some great art here. Back and forth. Meanwhile, at the same time, Spider-Ham is fighting Hulk Bunny. And basically, we got hijinks in action. We've got a tribute to a classic Steve Ditko Amazing Spider-Man scene in which Spider-Man was buried under all this rubble, but he lifted himself up with his willpower, and here Spider-Ham does the same thing. Then Spider-Ham comes in and, to help out Captain America fight Hulk Bunny. Meanwhile, the Masked Marauder comes back, and basically, through more fist fighting, they eventually figure out that... Wait a minute here, let me back up. They eventually figure out what's going on. They unmask the Masked Marauder, and they find out that he's actually Quincy Quackers, the guy who owns the video arcade, right?
No,
none of us remember.
This guy, no. This guy owns the amusement park. The amusement park, yeah. And nobody's been going there because everybody's been running over next door to the arcade.
Right. And then what's his name is like, you should have called me. Your amusement park is a much better site for my jelly bean factory. I would have made you a millionaire, but too late, right? He's already turned to a life of crime.
Right.
And that's pretty much the climax of the story. And then at the end, we get Spider-Ham and Captain America. They're like, oh, we got to get back to the Daily Beagle. But then, as they're wrapping up, it's like, and so Captain America and Spider-Ham return to their civilian identities of Steve Mouser and Peter Porker. But what of Bruce Bunny? Is he destined to live the rest of his life under the monstrous shadow of the Hulk Bunny? Will he? Can he ever again know peace? Only time will tell. Dun dun dun. Right?
I think I don't know what your typical focus is on these things, but I cannot take my eyes off the artwork. And I'm looking at page 18 of the comic. and it shows the one guy on that motorcycle. And even in like a typical superhero comic, you do not usually see that amount of detail and perspective, and it's friggin' brilliant. So and this was for a kid's comic, and the writing is so sharp. Like they're talking about leftist and rightist politics, and it's like, holy crap, this is like Howard the Duck level editorial cartooning. It's awesome.
Yeah, you know, I want to say one thing about that panel. One thing about this style of art I find is that I love superhero art, but one of the shortcuts of superhero art is to kind of just cut to a giant close-up of a guy's face or a big, big action shot with like no background. But the thing I like about this is, like you said, the perspective, the attention to detail, and the fact that we see exactly where he came from that wall, right? We see the little action line following him. And there's a lot of, it's almost like every panel is like a photograph. And it's like its own little mini story, and I think that's great. It's
great sequential storytelling. It really is.
I think the style definitely has a lot to do with that too. When in other comics, particularly like Spider-Man comics, because there's a little bit more sense of realism in the art, it sometimes feels rushed because maybe they have to add in a lot of detail, but don't have as much time. But with a simple style like this and having like the nice, clean, cartoony artwork, they're really able to focus on each panel and make it the best that they can, because they don't have to, make it realistic. They can, have this like nice, clean, cartoony style, and I absolutely love it.
Right. One of the things that kind of helped them bridge that gap between cartoony and typical Marvel superhero art is that their inker, Mark Armstrong was the penciler, but Joe Albelo was the inker, and he inked a lot of straightforward superhero stuff for Marvel. So he really carried that pedigree over, and it was a nice, like I said, a nice bridge. In later issues, they go balls out cartoony, and of course I'm all for that. But right now, this is a very interesting mesh, I think.
Yeah, it kind of does feel like a middle ground. Like the style of the art feels cartoony, and like the look of the characters, but how it's kind of laid out and what's happening feels more along the lines of a superhero comic. So it does kind of have that like 50-50 feel.
Well, even if you want to talk about, like, if you go to original page 14, like, this is a great page with the Captain America immersed in like smoke there, and mass marauders running away from him. And then if you notice, you want to talk about storytelling, he's running in the exact direction of the next panel where Spider-Ham is up. Jay Fosgitt, you mentioned the perspective there. Look at the perspective of Spider-Ham looking down at Hulk Bunny. Then Hulk Bunny, smashes through almost the side of the panel there, and it all fits together perfectly, right? Then it leads right into Spider-Ham, and that leads right into the next panel. It's perfect.
It's really beautiful cartooning. It definitely harkens back to the golden age of kids' comics, where they actually cared about the artwork.
Right. Gia Julie, what do you think of this art?
Oh, I love it. I've just been sitting here listening to you guys talk about it. It's like, I don't know what I like. Oh, no, I definitely know what I like better. It's like when the art is shitty and the conversation tearing apart is really good, or when the art is this fabulous and you get to listen to somebody who's like in the industry, who we get to talk to about like super awesome art. That is the conversation I really like to have. Despite liking the other kind of conversation, this is a really cool one too. So it's like,
nice.
Yeah, and it really, to me, it's helpful when the cartooning is cartooning and a little less illustrative, like sort of like trying to be half realist, because then the colors get helped out a lot more, and it's not such a, like, having shades of colors isn't such a big deal anymore, even though they are present here. Like, I don't know, everything just works. Everything is almost like perfect. It's like flawless. It's like Jose Garcia Lopez.
Right. Oh, right. Yeah, good comparison.
Yeah,
every line.
You just expect Mattel level perfection. The lines are tight. The colors are tight. Everything is tight. There's like almost no flaws. And that is what I enjoy to read in comics.
Absolutely.
Now, here's the thing. The story actually was really good, but one thing I personally would have preferred is if they did a satire that was a little bit closer to actual Spider-Man comics. Like, the fact that they brought in Hulk and Captain America, it was there's nothing wrong with it, but it just wasn't ideal for me. You know, I would rather have seen just a straight satire of Spider-Man. Did anyone else feel the same way, or no?
I'm fine with it because they're doing their own thing with these characters, and I think that they're using these well-established characters. That way, they don't have to sit you down and describe to you what happened with them, right? Like, it's Spider-Man, but he's a pig. Okay, I'm on the same page. Like, we don't need to go in and kind of like explain what's going on. Captain America, like, okay, he's got the same abilities as Captain America, and okay, he's you know, a journalist now instead of a soldier. Perfect. The Hulk, they don't sit and explain, you know, everything like the Hulk's backstory. You know who the Hulk is. Instead of like doing experiments with gamma radiation, it's this video game that's a gamma video game that turns him into the Hulk. Like, I think it's fun, and it definitely doesn't take anything away from me because it's, again, this like alternate reality. So
Right.
I think it's just absolutely fun.
Oh, totally. And if you go throughout the rest of the Spider-Ham series, you'll learn that they continue this line of thought. It's like, yes, we can just do animal versions of the Marvel characters, but we have the opportunity to sort of create their own reality here. So, and even though if in the Captain America comics, at least in the 80s, if not the 70s and 80s, he was a cartoonist. That was sort of his alternate, you know, if he had an alter ego, so to speak. But, you know, later on you find out Spider-Ham's origin is that he was originally a spider who was bitten by a radioactive Aunt May pig. Because she was, Aunt May was like the scientist trying to create like this atomic hairdryer for salons. And then she gets radiated and bites Peter, and then the spider, and he turns into Spider-Ham and pretends to be her nephew because she lost her memory. And it's crazy Mad Magazine level stuff, but it's just, kids will buy it. You know, kids are like, hey, that's fun. That's silly. Why not?
So, you know, that's the thing is I wish, I mean, is there, I don't even know if there's a Spider-Ham comic right now. Is there? I don't think there is.
There was. Yes, there was. And they were trying to sort of connect it into the Spider-Verse, the animated film, which is fine. And I did like that interpretation of Spider-Ham, but they changed. The whole gag there is that he knows he's a cartoon character. And that's not what they do in the comic. In the comic, it's like, no, they're all superhero animals.
Right,
you know?
Right.
He doesn't fight with a wooden mallet and, you know, Acme bombs or anything. So,
like, I like Into the Spider-Verse, but even just the idea of having to tie it in, they shouldn't have to. You should be able to pick it up and just understand exactly what's going on without any explanation, right?
Yeah.
Now, I skim-read the Goose Rider story. Do we want to talk about this briefly?
I love the Goose Rider story, particularly because that is Steve Mellor's brainchild right there.
Right.
And he did, so this, you guys might appreciate this. He did an Alpha Flight parody. That is probably my favorite of all the backup Spider-Ham stories. It was called Awful Flight. And so basically you have animal versions of all the Alpha Flight characters, except they're all wearing toques.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
And it's a big Canadian parody, and it's absolutely wonderful. You can find the thing in its entirety online if you look it up. Plenty of people have shared it, so highly encouraged.
I'm looking that up.
Yeah.
Awesome, yeah.
That might have started my appreciation of Canada, to tell you the truth.
Really?
Wow, it's beautiful. I love it.
Are we all that we were cracked up to be?
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, better.
Okay.
Yeah, and obviously this style is quite different from the main story art, right? Like, this is much different style of art.
Do you have a preference?
More Betty Boop. I honestly prefer this.
Okay.
Because it is less confined to, you know, proper, not anatomy, proper perspective and things like that.
Right.
But both were big influences on me. But this one in particular, God, I absolutely love Steve Mellor's art on this. It's very Betty Boop, very Fleischer Brothers, and nobody was really doing this at the time.
Right.
And he was so signature to him. It was amazing.
Excellent. So obviously, and I was really looking forward to this, and it was mostly because of the art. The story was it was actually, like you said, it was a little bit more political than I thought it would be. So I highly recommend this, not just for adults, or not just for kids, but for adults as well. And I know that there's a resistance by cool guys and adults that, they don't want to read a Spider-Ham comic, but this is definitely something that anyone could enjoy. Jay, I'm sure you'd agree with that, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the great thing about all the Spider-Ham stories is even though they're mainly focused in the Star line of comics, which were pretty safe, pale kid comics for Marvel, Spider-Ham had that sort of Muppety subversive edge that adults could enjoy on its own level.
Right. Josh, what do you think?
I would definitely recommend this comic. It was really fun. Had a lot of like cartoony moments. I think the story is super fun. The characters are great and dynamic. The art is fantastic. So it's a definite recommend for me.
Sweet. G.I. Jolie, what do you think?
I love it. I will recommend this to everybody who says, "Hey, should I read Marvel Team Up?" And I'll be like, no.
No.
Read Marvel Tales.
Read Marvel Tales, because this is what I assume Team Up would feel like.
Mm-hmm.
I want to mention, I spent all the years that I worked at Marvel, which wasn't a whole long time, but just, 2 or 3 years I was doing stuff for Marvel. I never stopped hounding them about letting me do Spider-Ham, and it came close a few times. So, yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, with that, so we all recommend it. Now we're going to move on. So there was actually a 2-year gap, 1983, then to 1985. Now we get Peter Porker, The Spectacular Spider-Ham #1, with this glorious cover by Michael Golden, one of my favorite artists. Jay, what do you think of this cover here?
Hold on one moment. I had it open and I just...
Okay, no problem.
All right, so this cover right here, is that the one you're talking about, issue 1 of Spider-Ham?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Did Michael Golden do it? I didn't even know that. I can't find a signature on there.
Yeah.
I guess that...
Because I looked it up on whatever, marvel.fandom.com. But yeah, that's Michael Golden, yeah.
That explains it, because it almost felt like Mark Armstrong stuff, but looking at it up close, no, I can definitely see. It's brilliant. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I like it. Big fan. So Josh, you can take it from here.
All right, yeah. So we start the comic off with Spider-Ham developing some pictures, and he runs down to the Daily Beagle to show them to J. Jonah Jackal. Also, forgive me if I accidentally say any of their like alter ego names and say J. Jonah Jameson or Peter Parker instead, because I'm so used to saying those names. It's kind of like ingrained in my brain. JJ doesn't really want the pictures because they paint Spider-Ham in too much of a good light. So he tells him he's got a new mission for him and a bunch of these new interns that he's hired, which I'm assuming these are like, I couldn't find, or like, they're not parodies, right? So these are like brand new characters for this comic. Okay, got you. So you have J. Jonah Jackal's son, J. Jeremiah Jackal Jr. You have a character named Bunsen Bunny, and then you have Adam Stray. And the three of them, including J. Jonah Jameson and Peter Porker, they hop aboard a plane because they're investigating these airplane disappearances that have been happening over the Bermuda Triangle. Or is that the Bermuda? They make up like a new...
Yeah, it's like
I can't remember what it's called.
Something close to it, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like this Bermuda Triangle type of thing. So we find out that it's the sinister Dr. Doom who is behind all of these airplane disappearances. So this like really crappy plane that Jackal has used crashed into the island, and everybody on board goes and tries to find safety or like some sort of civilization so they can get off this island, and they are then knocked out and captured by a group of kangaroos which is fantastic. so they're brought over to Dr. Doom's lab, where he kind of reveals his plan to them. Or I guess his backstory, about how he came across all of these kangaroos, and it's absolutely ridiculous. Like, normally in these Marvel comic stories, they have these elaborate backstories and they go in depth, and it's so painful to read because it's boring.
Tedious.
Like, I don't care, but this is so fun because it is like this long drawn out backstory, but it's so ridiculous, and the events that are happening are just so wild that it's absolutely hilarious. And I loved reading this like weird like tangent from Dr. Doom.
Right.
So he's fighting this universe's version of the Fantastic Four, named lovingly the Fantastic Fur. Yeah. And they attach to defeat Dr. Doom. They attach these like anti-gravity machines to him, and he flies all the way up into space. And then by the time the machines crap out, he falls back to Earth and lands in Australia. And because he comes from the sky, these kangaroos think that he's a god. So they start like bowing to him. So when he comes back to Latvia, he brings a bunch of kangaroos with him, and they kind of like become part of his crew and his like goons.
Hold on, Josh.
Yeah.
Can we just point out that it's called the Royal Kangaroo Court.
The Royal Kangaroo Court.
I know, right? Isn't that great?
The Royal Court of the Kangaroos. Like, come on, that's hilarious.
It's great. And like even the kangaroos themselves are like these weird stylized versions of this universe's kangaroos.
Well, they kind of, if you think about it, they look like Aboriginal art.
Right.
So that's really
they kind of do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tribal markings, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So the gang is thrown into jail, and we learn from some of the other prisoners that Dr. Doom has been experimenting on the crewmates of the other planes that he's stolen, and they've come back and their brains have just been kind of rattled, and they haven't really made much sense when they've come back to the cells. So we learned that Dr. Doom has been stealing these planes to try to get a band going to impress the kangaroos. And he's been strapping them to these machines, and this machine doesn't make them good at music. It just rattles their brains enough so that they make noise and move around like he's seen in rock music videos, which is fantastic. So the people that he's experimented on, it's not really working on them. So he takes the 3 kids, and I can't remember, how does J. Jonah Jackal get knocked out? Oh, he tries to escape. And he bangs his head off the rails and knocks himself out, which gives Peter Porker the opportunity to escape and don his costume and become Spider-Ham, where he then starts fighting with Dr. Doom's goons and the kangaroos. And he helps the kids escape, and they use the giant magnet that they've been using to capture the airplanes to magnetize Dr. Doom, and he starts screaming, and the kangaroos absolutely love it. And it turns out that this has been this like rock concert that they've been waiting for. So they record it and turn it into a song, which is like playing on the radios when they return back to New York, which I assume it's New York still.
I think it's New Yak.
New Yak. Oh, amazing.
Awesome.
New Yak City. Amazing.
I am pretty sure I'm right about that.
Okay.
That's fantastic. So yeah, we kind of get a nice little conclusion here. They all go back to New Yak, and the Daily Beagle has printed this magazine or this newspaper of what happened on the island, and Dr. Doom screaming, and it becomes this sensational hit, and everybody's listening to this song on the radio. People in the streets have got their boom boxes out. It's even playing on the radio, and Peter Porker is, riding up to the offices of the Daily Beagle. Even after he gets off the elevator, he's kind of wondering where this is coming from, and we end of we end with Peter Porker and the kids walking into J. Jonah Jackal's office, and he's also dancing to the song.
Wah, wah, wah.
Yeah, it's really fun. I think that possibly the previous story was a little bit stronger, in my opinion. This one was still really fun. I think it was just a little bit more like jumbled, not as straightforward as the other one, but it still had a lot of like funny moments and was really clever. And the art as well was still dynamic and fun.
Right. We should point out quickly. Oh, same artist. Yeah, same artist, same inker, right? Or different inker?
Yes. Nope. That's still the same. Joe Albelo was the inker.
Okay. But
And am I crazy? But does it say that Larry Hama colored both of these?
No, it's he's the editor. It's confusing the way that they group the things together, but he's the editor. Yeah.
yeah.
One thing I'd like to point out, so this is the first appearance of the Fantastic Fur, but not the last appearance.
Okay.
They got their own backstory in a future issue of of Spider-Ham, but they were inconsistent in that they were still called the Fantastic Fur, but Mr. Fantastic became Mooster Fantastic instead of the fox that he is here.
Okay.
And it's actually funnier. And it was drawn by Mike Mellor, Steve's brother. Same style. I think Steve actually penciled it and Mike inked it, but it is hilarious. I'm trying to think. It was the Simian Torch, the Thang, which he was supposed to be a bear like he is here, and Miss Fantastic Girl was Fantastic Gorilla, and Mooster Fantastic. So
You'll also notice in this picture there's also a fifth member, and that's Forbush.
Forbush Man.
yes, isn't that cool how they snuck him in there? He's a good fit for that. So
Isn't Jolie and Josh? Do you know who Forbush Man is?
No, not that I can think of any.
No.
Joel,
can't make
have you
any
ever read a
association.
comic book?
You know, if you tell me just like a vague description of what they look like, I might recognize it.
Let me just throw this out there real quick because we need a history lesson here. Forbush Man was Marvel's Alfred E. Newman when they did their own sort of humorous comic book called Not Brand Eck, and I got to draw I was one of the artists on the very last issue of Not Brand Eck, which came out in 2016, I think, and I got to do all the Forbush Man content. So he's basically this little numbskull cartoony superhero with a pot on his head and long underwear and boots and everything. So yeah, fascinating. I know.
I think I'm gonna need a little more description.
And he's also he's a parody of what's it called? Red Tornado, right?
No, but
The original.
that was DC. The original Red Tornado. If there was a parody of him, it was Ma Hunkel.
Well, no, that's what I mean. Yeah, Ma Hunkel was the original Red Tornado.
There was a Red Tornado. Well, no, you're right, because there was a Red Tornado later on as well.
Right.
But no, I think it's just a color coincidence, honestly.
Okay.
But Marvel and DC borrowed iconography from one another rampantly, so who can really say?
Right.
So yeah, and so in Forbush Man, Irving Forbush was kind of like a mascot for Marvel, and then Forbush Man was like the superhero secret identity, and they brought him back for, remember What The?
Yep.
Okay? Yeah, there was like What The was like the 80s Marvel Mad Magazine, and
I have all of those.
Yeah, it was great. I got all the original issues. Josh, did you read it?
No, not all the way through. I'm familiar with it though.
Yeah.
One of my good buddies was an artist on there, Hilary Barta.
Yeah, he's a great artist. Yeah.
Yeah, he's terrific. He resides in Chicago, and he did like a lot of Plastic Man stuff for DC, and he's worked for Bongo Comics for the last few years on The Simpsons, worked on the SpongeBob comics. So yeah, his stuff's all over What The.
Great stuff. So anyway, yeah, and now I should point out the writer for this issue, it's not Tom DeFalco, it's Steve Skeates, who I'm most familiar with from his scripts for Aquaman, going all the way back to the late 60s and early 70s. And of course, he's also a Facebook friend. He doesn't know who I am, but I've got him on Facebook. But I don't know his age, but I'm gonna guess that when he did this story, he had to be around 30, mid 30s maybe. based on this story, I'm gonna guess he didn't think much of MTV. What do you guys think? Do you think it was just a little bit of old man yelling at a cloud, sort of criticizing music and music videos at the time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's the vibe I picked up.
I'd be
You know, it's
surprised
still
otherwise.
funny.
It was still funny, but yeah, I definitely picked up that vibe.
I mean, I do that in my own comics, so I understand. Stupid Zoom.
Yeah,
Yell at millennials.
Julie,
Yeah.
What did you think? What story did you like better, this one or the previous one?
Because it was a tighter story, the previous one, but because this one was a little more outlandish. It's just like margins.
right.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they're very close. Like I like this one because it's ridiculous, but it works.
Right. And it's funny because Jay, we'll have to have you back on in a future episode when we talk about Spider-Man, but there's some sloppy, confusing, boring Spider-Man comics from this time period. And this comic, I mean, there's that typical, like we said, cool dude that doesn't want to read cartoon animals. These two stories we just read are better structured, right? They're funnier.
Mm-hmm.
They're not boring for 1 second. Like everything contributes to moving the story forward. And it's just funny that people tend to kind of dismiss funny animal comics, but I think both of these so far are really good.
I think Spider-Ham would have succeeded more in this period in the 80s if his comic had been released directly through Marvel and not through its Star Comics imprint, because no adult took the Star Comics seriously. Right. And it's unfortunate because there was good stuff done in there, but not enough. A lot of it was just schlock. So
I remember even though, like, as a kid, I was buying G.I. Joe's Transformers, and I remember as soon as I hit high school, I mean, granted, most kids, as soon as they hit high school, they dropped comics altogether because they were ashamed to be reading them in the 80s. But when I hit high school, I was ashamed to read G.I. Joe and Transformers because those were known as toy comics. So it's probably the same thing as no teenager wanted to read a Star comic because that was for kids, right?
Yeah, theoretically, yeah. So
yeah.
But anyway, again, I recommend this comic. Jay, I'm assuming you recommend it?
Highly.
G.I. Joe Lee?
Yeah, I usually do.
Yep, and Josh?
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
Oh, and by the way, I found Michael Golden's signature. It's on the bottom of the wing that's facing the reader, and it's under the shadow. Yeah.
That is an elaborate signature. Any signature that requires a mechanical compass is not worth the effort.
Oh, it looks like a glyph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like this is not the Da Vinci Code.
Yeah, seriously.
But anyway, so unfortunately, Peter Porker only lasted 17 issues. I'm not sure what the sales were like. But starting with Marvel Tales starring Spider-Man, number 201, they started doing... I guess I'm assuming that the stories they were reprinting were shorter than the average Marvel story at the time. I'm going to guess they were about 17 pages, and a typical Marvel story was 21, I think. And so they had some pages to fill at the back. So, right?
And this was original. These are original stories too.
Yes.
It's not like they were reprinting old content, but yes.
Right. Yeah. So the Spider-Man story would have been a reprint, and then the Spider-Ham story would have been brand new. Right. So, and Jay, you volunteered to summarize this one, right?
Well, okay. So plot-wise, what I can tell you is how it starts off is at this point, Spider-Man had gotten his black costume, and that was becoming pretty cool. This was after Secret Wars and all that. And when they decided they were going to bring back Spider-Ham as a backup feature in Marvel Tales, they're like, hey, let's put him in the black costume, and that'll be kind of fun. So they got to play off the gag of, oh, he's got BO because he's sweating in a hot black costume. And look, his dandruff is very unsightly on his black costume. Yeah. So it's a great visual gag, and the black costume doesn't really last. But I thought it was great that they started off, and starting off with a parody of the Shocker, which is Shock Kerr, because he's a dog, obviously. Now, beyond that, I don't remember much of the plot beyond that. I was just so absorbed into the fact that, hey, they brought him back when I thought he was gone for good. They have a duck get murdered here. That's pretty, for what's supposed to be a kid's comic, that's pretty dark, and I can appreciate that. So
Well, there's also a really sharp, not sharp, but it's actually it's a modern. It's like this could fit in today. A parody, right, of an extreme right wing politician here.
Uncle
what's
Scram.
Uncle Scram, yeah, he's like, America, greatest nation on earth, except for one thing, foreigners. Everywhere you look, nothing but dad-gum foreigners with their loud music and their Scotch plaids and their transparent noodles.
It's like, excuse me, I'm just going to take my transparent noodles and head off to Canada.
Right.
that's
So, yeah.
hilarious.
This is a very harsh criticism of xenophobia and a lot of right-wing thinking that unfortunately has just gotten worse today. But
Well, this was the tail end of the Reagan era, and
Right.
making way for the Bush era. So
right, and you know what? We didn't really touch on this in the last issue, but they bring back the same supporting cast, right? These guys here. Did we touch on the fact that this one guy, the Black Cat, is clearly he says in the previous story he's from the inner city. I mean,
Yeah.
it's definitely a little wincing.
Yeah.
And I knew that going in. It's like, oh, so you're the black cool character that every 80s cartoon ended up with. Got to slap a
Right.
5 when you walk in a room.
yeah,
Yeah. Even the fact that like he's Adam's stray, like he's a stray cat,
Right.
Yeah.
and like
yeah.
it's just it's
That was the 80s, man. That's, we could,
Yeah.
even in kids' comics, you could make jokes like that. And just, that was 30 plus years ago. So you can see that wouldn't swing today.
Right. Right.
but yeah, unfortunately, the story kind of gets cut short before it can even get going because it is only a few pages long. But it's pretty much. I mean, I see it like. I mean, I will keep reading, but I can only predict it's going to be just as good as the other ones, right? This is Steve Mellor on script, Joe Albelo on art, so it's the same creators from the previous.
We
one.
don't have Mark Armstrong anymore. He disappeared from comics at this point, and I definitely think his presence is missed visually. Whereas
Yes.
Joe Albelo does the best job possible, but his strength is not straight cartooning. So I think the art's actually weaker without Mark's pencils and layouts underneath. And that was my criticism going forward reading all, because I would buy Marvel Tales just for the Spider-Ham stuff.
Right. So how many? So Mark Armstrong, did he end up drawing most of the regular series then, like the 17 issues?
Almost all of it. Fred Hembeck did one issue, which, if you're familiar
Okay.
with Fred's work, he's very amateurish in his cartooning, but it's kind of like Gary Larson in The Far Side. You love it because it's so bad.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so that issue was kind of ugly. I wasn't real fond of that. But
Okay.
mostly it was Mark Armstrong steering the whole thing.
Yeah, we actually reviewed. Do you remember the issue of Spectacular Spider-Man that Fred Hembeck did? It was like,
Yes,
80 something. Yeah, we did that one a few weeks back. So
I have that one, yeah.
we love the scene when the Fly. Remember, he gets distracted by the spilt soda pop and his J. Jonah Jameson's office, and he has to lick it up. That was so funny.
Like, I'm going to get you, but wait.
yeah.
Just let me lick up right after I lick up this spilled pop on the corner of this desk.
Right.
See, and Fred Hembeck was a great comedic writer, better than he was a cartoonist. I would have liked to have seen somebody, Sergio Aragonés, come in and do some Spider-Ham or do anything more from Marvel. He was always more buzzy with the DC guys, I found. So
Oh, yeah, he would have been great.
Right.
Yeah, I think the whole time we've been talking about the art, that is who, like, what did you call it, Jay? You called it Big Feet?
yeah, Bigfoot cartoon.
Yeah, that's who I've been thinking of, and I could not think of his
Totally.
name. Sergio Aragonés, yeah.
Well, if you look at like the comic strips from the golden age of newspaper, so like the early turn of the 20th century, that's the style of cartooning you're going to see, and that's where the Bigfoot cartooning kind of came into play. Like early Popeye.
Yeah. What about what's his name? R. Crumb, Robert Crumb. I mean,
Crumb carried, yes, he brought that cartooning back into the mainstream in the early 60s. So
Right.
he was a big student of that himself.
awesome. Yeah, he's a great artist, and obviously, yeah, like that famous image, "Keep on Truckin'." Everyone knows that image, right? The Mr. Natural,
Yes.
the Bigfoot walk. Yeah. So yeah, there's not really much to say about this story. It's only a few pages long, but I don't know what it is about modern readers, but they complain anytime you publish a reprint. I love reprints.
Me
Especially, yeah, like especially the new ones, how they're usually only $1 each. But even back in these days, I was buying Marvel Tales because, nothing better than a classic John Romita senior drawn story. Even this one is Chris Claremont and John Byrne. A classic Spider-Man Marvel team up. And of course, you're getting some new material from Spider-Ham. So why would anyone complain, right? This is good stuff.
Well, my favorite books, like what started me out collecting superhero comics in the early 80s was Marvel Saga, which was all reprints. Like, you remember Marvel Saga?
Yeah. Yes, they would summarize. Yeah, like they'd basically go, they'd summarize a few issues of Hulk, then they'd go to Spider-Man, then Avengers, and they basically just tell you, like, you could get the whole story just by reading Marvel Saga.
How it all knit together with other characters and other, whatever. And it was great. It was the best education I had to the Marvel Universe and why I became such a huge fan of that, more so than DC.
Right. Is that still true today?
It is with me, yeah, big time. I'll always love Marvel because that's what my earliest appreciation of superheroes came from.
Interesting. Okay. So I have another question because we've debated about different art styles over the years, and we have some people who have no affinity for cartoony art in any way. I want to know what your opinion is of somebody like, for example, Alex Ross. What do you think of Alex Ross?
I think beautiful artwork. I love his artwork. I think he's a kind of a poor sequential storyteller. I think that everything he does is a pinup shot, and the panels do not necessarily carry the story necessarily. Without the text, you wouldn't necessarily be able to follow his sequentials at all. And that's fine, I mean, he started off in advertising, which was the singular image had to tell the whole story. But he treats all of his panels that way, and he has never had really clever layouts, or his panels never really carried the action as well. It was just beautiful to look at.
Right. Yeah, I'll have to agree with that. It'd be interesting to see, because we talk about this too, about the different steps of comic book art. It'd be interesting to see somebody do a rough breakdown of just the story and then have him kind of draw his realistic figures over that. And I wonder how that would work,
Maybe that
cool.
would help his storytelling.
Yeah. Well, unless his ego is big enough that he would be like, I'm never going to do that. But yeah. I think that'd be cool to see.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I mean, obviously, I recommend not just the story, but I recommend Marvel Tales as a reprint book. So, this is back in a time when reprints were a lot more common for Marvel, and this is definitely a fun book. G.I. Julie, would you recommend this?
Yeah, do you know what? I have a question. Reprints, when they reprinted them, did they reprint these ads too?
No, the ads were relevant to the time. So, and I love the ads in that book, by the way. Because even the ads have one of the ads in particular, it was like for a model car or a remote control car.
That's what I'm talking about.
Holy crap, that is vintage 80s cartooning there, and they don't draw like that anymore, and I miss it. I love it.
I also love the Tang one too.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
Power of what is it? Be orange? Be the most
be a
orange.
Big orange, big shot with Tang.
Yeah. It's just so there's so much encouragement of power in the most mundane of things.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and it's when you do it in when you cartoon the art, it takes on a strange message.
Yeah. Totally.
I don't know. Yeah, it's like I don't know how to describe it, but this car one is the one that I was like, build a reputation. And you kind of scroll down, and you're like, oh my god,
that kid's gonna get laid.
Yeah, it's like he may only be 12 years old, but does he have an 80s? Did he build an 87 Mustang GT or an 81?
Because
he sure did.
When you're 12 years old, girls think you're cool if you play with model cars.
They did.
Obviously, that's the message. That's the takeaway.
So yeah, like I said, Jay, we'd love to have you back on. Are you a big Spider-Man fan as well?
Yes, I am. Very much so. Spider-Man's probably my favorite non-smashy superhero, whereas the Incredible Hulk and Thing are probably neck and neck for my favorite smashy superhero.
Yes.
Oh, if we would have known that, we would have had you on when Spider-Man teamed up with Hulk or Thing. But maybe there'll be another one coming up.
That's anytime.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind for sure. Anything else, Josh? Do you want to ask Jay anything else before we wrap up?
I guess not particularly about Spider-Ham or anything, but I guess I'm familiar with your work with the Rough Side of the Rock.
Yeah, Fraggle Rock.
Yeah, because I read that a few years back when I was working on one of the Jim Henson Fraggle Rock spin-off TV shows. So I was working on Doozers for a little while, and I was interested in, like, I had watched Fraggle Rock as a kid and wanted to, get some more like Fraggle Rock content, and I found that book. Yeah, it's really fun.
Thank you. I'm a lifelong Henson fan. We don't have time to get into it, but believe me, I am.
That's another podcast.
Oh, it is all unto itself. But the Henson Company actually asked for me through Boom to work on one of the issues for that series. So I got to write and draw my own Fraggle Rock issue, which was beyond a dream come true. And a lot of my friends ended up as background Fraggles in the book, like Jay Clark, who does an Elegant Weapon podcast, is in there, and people like that. A lot of Canadian friends are in there, honestly.
Oh, it's great.
Now, I haven't seen it yet, but I want to know, what is your opinion of the Netflix Dark Crystal show?
Absolutely wonderful. It is. Jim Henson would be thrilled that they did that, because it is the perfect accompaniment to the original movie and expands on everything that he would have wanted to expand on, I'm confident to say.
Nice.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's beautifully done. I mean, a perfect mix of puppetry and CG.
And the story itself is fantastic too. And I really love when it is a show obviously aimed at kids, but it's not a childish show. Like they tell the story that they want to tell, and that's all that matters. And it doesn't matter what age demographic you're in, you will enjoy this show for sure.
What's one of the things I learned, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
I found out that the Henson Company approached Netflix about, they're like, hey, what do you guys think about doing a CG animated Dark Crystal sequel? And they're like, actually, you guys do puppets, right? Why don't you do it with puppets? So
nice.
Netflix had to sell Henson on that, and they're like, okay. So,
oh, that's interesting too, because the second it didn't get renewed for a second season. It got canceled.
It was only because of cost and COVID.
Right. Oh, really? Okay. So I didn't realize that COVID was a factor as well. Okay.
Canceled a lot of their stuff because they cannot readily put anything back into production right now.
Right.
So, and it was a very expensive show, but even with the high numbers they got, it was almost impossible for them to break even or turn any profit.
Wow.
So there's no chance of it coming back then?
I wouldn't say never, but it's done at Netflix. I can say that much for a fact. I've had a lot of friends that worked on the series in one capacity or another. So, no, not through Netflix, but I do think it's got more life.
Nice. Hope so, yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah, so do you want to tell us if anyone wants to follow you, or do you have anything coming up you'd like to talk about?
Well, right now, for the last 2 years, I've been working on a series of all ages books written. I never met the actual writer, but I'm the illustrator on them. They're young Donald books. So Donald Duck and the Disney characters when they're around about 12 years old. And I've been drawing these for the last 2 years. So hopefully they'll be available in North America in the coming year. Right now, they're being released in Belgium and Germany and France and
wow.
Europe is crazy about the Disney stuff. So they got first release, and we'll see when it comes out here. And I'm also still working on Bodhi Troll, which because of COVID and other factors has been pushed back and back and back, but it's still going to happen.
Nice.
Yeah, you're talking about Bodhi Troll animated, not just the book, right?
I'm just talking about the book. There's nothing planned for animated right now. Though I have been in talks with a friend of mine who is an animation director in Dublin, Ireland, and we're hopeful.
Okay. Well,
that's great.
That's great. Well, like we said, we're definitely going to have you on back again, and we'll keep our eyes peeled for any Hulk or Thing team-ups for sure.
Now that we know that they're your favorite smashy superheroes.
Smashy.
All right.
So yeah, definitely. So yeah, we'll have you back again, and we'd like to thank you again for joining us.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right, and Josh, you can take it from here.
Yeah, we also want to thank you guys for listening to the podcast. It really helps when you leave us a review over on Apple Podcast, or you can drop us a line on Twitter at HCT Spidercast. Please let us know what you guys think about the episode and the comics that we're reading as well. We do definitely want to keep that conversation going.
That's right, and we want to thank G.I. Jolie again for joining us as usual, and we'll see you again next week, G.I. Jolie.
Yeah, probably.
All right, and until next Monday, this has been Here Comes the Spidercast.
All right, see you then.